Good morning, guys. Welcome to today's training. Now, if you're new to me, I'm Burtcher, and I help codependents or survivors of narcissistic relationships rediscover happiness in their life by going through the 3 phases of happiness after codependency, which is healing, knowing yourself, and sharing yourself. So heal yourself, know yourself, share yourself, boom. You'll be thriving beyond that. All right, so before we get started today with today's topic, which is about, are they narcissistic, avoidant, or both? I need to share this out to the community. I need to find my page. There we go. So the community is your safe haven. It's where you can get guidance and support. You can get tools. You can get community, connection, and understanding from people going through or that have been through the same experience you have. So you can see that you're not crazy, that you're not alone, and that there is a shelter for you in that storm. So you can find that link above on Facebook, below on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, because I bring out new trainings 3 to 4 times a week on average. So let's do this. Good morning, guys. Yay. So I get this question a lot lately. How can I tell the difference between someone with an attachment style called avoidant versus someone who is narcissistic? We tend to conflate the two. We tend to confuse the two because there are some very strong similarities. So first, let's talk about attachment styles. So every human being has what's called an attachment system. This is how we emotionally bond with another human being. And there's basically 4 types that bonding will fall into. And this bonding experience, this type of bonding experience, it's an experience, in other words. My brain. Attachment systems are the experience we have when we bond with someone. So if you feel really secure, you feel really seen, you feel really safe being seen, hi Michelle, you have what's called secure attachment. If you're okay with vulnerability, that you have a solid grasp of how to navigate, say, rejection or loss or pain, you're going to have a higher threshold for the uncertainty as you develop attachment with someone. And that means that you have more of a secure base. Your sense of value, your sense of worth isn't highly disturbed or dysregulated if you get accepted or if you get rejected in your life. That's called secure attachment. And then you have what's called anxious attachment. This is where we feel an anxiety about them not loving us anymore or liking us anymore. We think that after they have left, that their feelings have changed or that we no longer exist in their mind. This causes a lot of anxiety in us, a lot of panic in us, and it causes us typically to chase after them and try to control things and try to get reassurance from them that we're still loved, we're still valuable to them. And this is a result of an unregulated and unattuned parent to a child. The child didn't feel secure in asking for what it wanted and what it needed. The parent was irregular in how they responded to the child's needs and wants and their presence. Then you have what's called avoidant attachment. This is where the individual avoids the proximity of other people, whether physically or emotionally or both. This is where they feel easily smothered and overwhelmed by the emotional attention from another person, whether that person is giving them love or attention or asking for it. They often fear being absorbed into the other person and losing their autonomy and their freedom. They experience a lot of emotional numbness and a desire for space and openness there because it allows them to connect back with themselves. They struggle with the closeness or proximity of another person, whereas someone with anxious attachment struggles with the space between them and the other person. And then you have what's called disorganized, which is all about a combination of anxious and avoidant coming in together, and that creates this conflict of I need you and I'm really scared to lose myself by having you. So that's a start-stop kind of thing. Come into the room, might ask or want to ask for something and then leave, and then come back in and try it again and leave. It's this in and out kind of experience with both sides of that attachment. So that we understand what attachment styles are, and this is the experience we have when we're bonding with someone. This is really, really important to understand. If you have anxious, disorganized, or avoidant attachment, that's not a signal that something's wrong with you. What it is, it's telling us about your story, about your experience in attachment. And the real thing here is that these are not faults. These are not things that you need to fix. What happens with healthy people, or rather with healthy available relationships, is we evolve from the attachment point we start at. Let's say it's avoidant. We evolve into a secure attachment by leaning into connection and learning how we're safe with this person and that they're not going to consume us. If we're anxious attachment, we lean into the space and realize that that person keeps us in their hearts and their minds, and they care about us, and that we're secure with the space between me and them. That's the magic here. We evolve into secure attachment from where we start out at. Really, really important. A lot of people try to heal their attachment system, and that tends to give them the false impression that they need to have a secure attachment to start with, which isn't a realistic thing, especially if you've dealt with narcissistic abuse or neglect. You're not going to have that. You shouldn't have that. You've been abused. The world's been really, really hard on you. It's rational and reasonable to have the attachment style that you do. So we can apply some compassion to that and understand ourselves there. And then from there, build into secure attachment with people that demonstrate that they're healthy and trustworthy and that we would like to have that bond with. Okay, so with that foundation established, now we can start looking at a narcissistic person versus an avoidant person. Typically, narcissistic people get into relationships. Typically, I mean all the time. They get into a relationship for a specific kind of function. Now, codependents and healthy people try to get into relationships for a different kind of function. And I call this the benefit-centered versus connection-centered relationship dynamic, or spectrum. So, a benefit-centered relationship is what narcissistic individuals want. What that means is they're getting into relationships so that they can get a benefit. So it's like you're the donut, they want the donut, so they get in a relationship with you to eat the donut because they want your supply, and then when they're done, they discard you. They move on with their lives, just like we would do with food, or we would do with cars or things that we use, right? So benefit-centered relationships are about using something or getting a benefit. Now, codependents and healthy people are going for what's called connection-centered relating, or connection-centered relationships. This is where they want to feel or experience an emotional connection with another human being. They want that experience reciprocated. They want to feel close to someone. And this is fundamentally important to understand, guys, because with avoidant individuals, they're still seeking that connection. But because of their experience with connection being an overwhelming, consuming one, where they have to give themselves up to keep the love of another person, they avoid the connection. Narcissistic people just don't care about connection. They just care about getting their donut and then moving on with their lives. Now let that settle in for a second. It's one of the prime differences here. Now, avoidant people can sometimes appear like they get a benefit and then they run away. This is because I call this bursting. So they open up and they feel connected, and then it becomes overwhelming. Their bucket of connection gets full, and they have to make space in order to create space in their bucket to receive more. This looks a lot like a discard pattern. The difference here with an avoidant, especially, and this is where you'd want to go, is a conscious avoidant. He or she is going to acknowledge that that's what they're doing. And they're going to acknowledge that, hey, I just need a little emotional space from this because I'm full, so I just need to take some space for me. And it's not a rejection of you. This is an important thing. A person asking for space so they can come back to themselves is an act of love for the relationship, an act of respect for the relationship. because they want to make more space to receive you and to maintain the connection they have with you. So a conscious avoidant individual is going to respond that way because they're working towards more connection and more what I call proximity tolerance, the ability to tolerate closeness without losing oneself or becoming overwhelmed by it. So that's key there. Now, a narcissistic individual is going to get very antagonistic with your requests for connection and closeness, and they're going to attack you with it. They're going to start putting you down. So you go from that seduction phase where they were getting all the supply they wanted and you were getting all this attention and love. They move right into that abuse phase. They're criticizing you, they're putting you down, telling you you're too much, too sensitive, too needy, a burden, things like that. That's a really important signal because unhealthy people, even if they're not narcissistic, unhealthy people are going to respond that way because they don't have a healthy relationship to emotional needs and wants. I'm going to put a big like blinking stars and exclamations. Your needs and wants are not wrong or bad. Your needs and wants are good. Needs and wants are a means to connection. So when you come from a benefits or connection-centered relationship, needs and wants are how we connect and understand and reciprocate. We contribute and receive from others, contribute to them and receive from them through needs and wants. That's how that functions. In benefit-centered relating, it's all about I get what I need or I want, and then you figure it out. I don't care about what you want and need. I got what I wanted. See ya. So it's a really myopic, definitely a narcissistic and toxic point of view, in my opinion. Unless that's your agreement. If you have a benefit-centered relationship where that's the agreement, great. It's consensual, so yeah, you're choosing that. So with avoidant individuals, they're looking for connection, but they don't know how to handle the smothering, and they don't understand, especially if they're unconscious, they don't understand what's really going on for them. So they don't have a positive or healthy relationship with their attachment system, or they have no knowledge of it. And so that can create some anxiety in them, and they can get really dismissive. They can become really avoidant. They can become cold or distant because they don't know how to respond to what they're feeling. Because they're feeling, first of all, this numbness, this sense of overwhelm that turns into a numbness. And they don't know what to do with that because they were feeling it. It was real for them, and then it's just poof, it's not there. And it's really confusing to them because they don't understand why their nervous system is doing that. It's doing that because it reaches a saturation point, and now it needs to drain that connection pod a little bit so it can feel again, and it can understand itself again. And so it's in a real fundamental way, it's kind of a relational trauma. When we are smothered or we're parentified, the really graphic term for it's emotional incest, where the parent smothers the child and makes the child responsible for regulating the parent. So the child never really fully develops into their own sense of emotional autonomy and sovereignty. That's what avoidants are wrestling with. And so unconscious ones will usually be just cold and distant. They're not going to be abusive. So the cycle would be different. You go through a seduction phase, as we all do in the first part of any relationship that's romantic, because that's where the euphoria is going to be present. Now there is a difference between euphoria in the love addiction sense and then limerence or just the, goody-goody feel on set, lovey-doveys of a healthy person. Because that healthy person realizes that a lot of this is fantasy. It feels good, but I don't even know this person yet. So I'm going to respond to them by discovering them. Whereas a person with living in codependency land or fantasy or love addiction is going to be like, all these feelings are facts, and this is who the person really is, and stuff like that. But we all start off with some of this kind of flirtation, seduction phase. But in an avoidant experience, they're going to go into a withdrawal rather than an abuse. And then they will move into a distance. They'll pull away and they'll become cold rather than discard. Now, discard and cold can look the same way, but they have different motivators. Okay? And the real difference you can see here is the withdrawal versus the abuse. That's important. There can be people who have avoidant attachment that aren't abusive, right? I mean, if we can really acknowledge that fact, then it becomes really easy to detect the difference between a narcissistic person and a person with avoidant attachment. Now, I speak as a person with a strong leaning towards avoidant attachment. I have disorganized attachment, so I deal with both, or what's called fearful avoidant and things like that. But I'm not abusive when I go cold. What I do is I communicate that, hey, I just need some space for me, because I'm consciously aware of my avoidant tendencies. When I was unconscious of my avoidant tendencies, people would point out and say, hey, you're pulling away, what's going on there? And then I would come around and I would own it. See, that the fundamentals of healthy people, regardless of their attachment traumas and where they're coming from, is that they own their behaviors, they own their feelings, their choices, and their actions. People who are willing to radically own themselves are people you can work with. They're people that you can grow with and that you can understand, because they're willing to understand and acknowledge themselves and their role in the experiences that they're having in their life. Without ownership, you will not be able to grow a relationship. That's fundamental. Then from ownership comes change, and that change is motivated by a desire in that individual to be something better, to improve their skills in some way. And it's also motivated by understanding and empathy for themselves and for you. These are fundamentally the differences between a healthy person and an unhealthy person. And this is how you can smoke out healthy avoidance versus unhealthy ones, or even narcissistic individuals. Narcissistic individuals lack empathy. They do not care about how you feel. They care about what they get out of the agreement. That's their priority, is them. They attack, they abuse, they discard, because that's how they keep control. It's how they avoid accountability, and it's how they get part of their supply. Healthy people aren't going to do those things. They don't think the way a narcissistic or abusive person thinks. They don't believe that they're entitled to cause someone else pain because they're in pain or they're not getting what they want. If you feel like you're dealing with a 3-year-old in your relationship, then you're dealing with someone with a lot of emotional immaturity and likely a large number of unhealthy narcissistic traits. You're not going to be able to grow that relationship very easily, and it's going to cost you dearly. So be mindful of that. It's one of the fundamental differences between someone with avoidant attachment and somebody with narcissistic traits is the abusive nature of the individual, their sense of entitlement to treat people the way they do, their lack of empathy, their lack of accountability and ownership. Boom, boom, boom. Because avoidant people have empathy. They take ownership. They understand. They're willing to grow. Unhealthy people, narcissistic people, aren't going to do those things because that puts them in the corner. And now they have to confront themselves and deal with the shit they are creating in their world and in others. And that's not something they want to deal with. So this is how you deal with it. Now, most narcissists are avoidant because they're not interested in connection. They're interested in that benefit, right? Now, that doesn't mean all avoidants are narcissistic. Again, it's the discernment at the fundamental level of ownership, empathy, accountability, and change. What do they do with those things? If they're not operating in those categories in a positive and healthy way, then it doesn't matter if they're narcissistic or not. It matters that they're unhealthy, and it's time to move on with your world so that you can get your needs met. Man, everybody's calling today. That's the bottom line, guys. Choose people who own their behavior, who are accountable, who empathize, and who are willing to grow. And then you can build a relationship, whether it's a friendship, a romantic relationship, or a business relationship with those individuals in a very secure way. Okay? So that's my bit on narcissistic versus avoidant individuals. Now you've got some criteria that can help you discern between the two. Guys, I appreciate you. Remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. Be safe out there. And I'll see you guys in our next training. Okay, bye-bye.